What I would do to take away this fear of being loved, allegiance to the pain. Now I fucked up and I'm missing you. I'll never be like you.
Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, Rays of Sunshine. Today I'm going to show you how to do this fall glam look. So if you want to see how to do this look, stay tuned. So right now I'm using Urban Decay's Eyeshadow Primer Potion in the shade Eden on my eyelids, and I'm buffing this out with a Real Techniques Deluxe Crease Brush. Now I really love using this eyeshadow primer when I'm doing colorful looks or looks with glitter because it never creases, especially when you use Laura Mercier's translucent powder, which I'm doing right here. So I'm applying that powder with my Real Techniques Deluxe Crease Brush, and afterwards I'm dusting that powder off with my Morphe E23 brush. Now I'm using the same brush to dip into Transition in that Holy Grail palette and lay that down as my base or my first color. Now I'm keeping this shade towards the top of my eye because I found that when this transition shade mixes with other colors, it tends to make the look more cool toned than warm, so since it's fall we want to stay warm. Next I'm using the Morphe R38 from the Rose Gold collection and going into Persimmon from my Smashbox Art Love color palette. Now I really love this palette. This is actually a cheat color that I'm using on my eyes, but I'm placing this right underneath that transition color from the Holy Grail palette. Now I'm going into that same Smashbox palette with my Morphe M441 brush in the shade Plum, which is also a cheat color, and I'm just putting that right underneath Persimmon. Now to make sure these shades are blending, I'm going back into that Persimmon and blending these two shades together. Now at this point I realize Transition is too light for this look, so I'm going into Are You Kidding Me with the same brush and blending out that outer layer. Now I'm going into the shade Wine and Dine with the Morphe M433 brush and just bringing this into my crease and deepening the intensity as well as the outer V area. Something I do to make sure my eyeshadow blends seamlessly is going back with previous shades and brushes to make sure that each layer is blending well together. So I'm using the M441 to blend out the Plum and now the R38 to blend out the Persimmon. Now when you use this method, you're going to lose some of your intensity, so I'm going back in with my M433 and Wine and Dine and just intensifying that crease. Here I'm using my Maybelline Fit Me Concealer in the shade 25 Medium and a flat brush from BH Cosmetics and just carving out my crease. Now it doesn't really matter which concealer you used, I just grabbed this one because it's too light for my skin to highlight with now. As long as the concealer you're using doesn't tend to crease, you're going to be just fine. Now usually I would use a smaller brush so I could make this cut more precise, but since this look is using glitter, I didn't find it really necessary. That's not the look I was really going for. Here I'm applying more translucent powder to make sure that concealer doesn't crease on me. Now I'm going into the Morphe 350 Shimmer palette and just using those two colors, mixing them together and putting them on my lid. Now I am placing the lighter shade towards the inner part of my eye and kind of doing an ombre effect to put the darker shade towards the outside of my eye. And I'm going in again with the M433 in the shade Wine and Dine to blend out that crease a little bit, but not too much because I do still want to have somewhat of a cut crease effect. Here I'm using a smudge brush from BH Cosmetics and going into the Holy Grail palette in the shade Teddy Bear and just deepening the outer V. Now I'm just blending that area with Teddy Bear and Wine and Dine to my liking to make sure it's a darker corner but it's not very pronounced. Now it's time for my favorite part, the glitter. I'm using Orbit Orange from bulkglitters.com and Glitter 04 from NYX Cosmetics. It's kind of like a copperish, reddish glitter. And I'm just using NYX glitter glue to apply these. I put it on with my finger and I'm using that same flat shader brush from earlier that I used to cut the crease to apply the glitter. Now, just like I did an ombre effect earlier with the eyeshadows I used in this area, I'm going to do the same with the glitters. So I'm using more of the copper toned glitter on the inside inner corner of my eye and the more orbit orange pinkish type glitter towards the outer edge. After applying the glitter, I'm using the shade Wine and Dine to blend out the outer corner edge of my eye. Now, without applying any extra glue, I'm putting some more glitter on my eye just so I can get that sprinkled, diffused, fairy glitter look. Now for the face, I'm using my Vitamin C Glow Boosting Moisturizer from the Body Shop, and I absolutely love this stuff because it lasts all day and it really gives me a moisturized, glowing effect. Now I'm using my Sonia Kashuk Perfecting Translucent Illuminator. Now I did put on a little bit too much, I noticed afterwards, but this is really great for just applying that base glow or just getting a subtle glow. You can wear this without makeup. It does give a little bit of a glittery effect, but it's very, very pretty and it makes you look very iridescent. Here I'm using Dewy and Smooth Maybelline Fit Me in the shade 355 Coconut, and I put this on with a damp beauty blender. Now here I realized that I didn't put on any primer, but for the purpose of this night and since I set my face pretty well, I found it was really not necessary, and my makeup still lasted the entire night. But if you do want to use a primer, that's completely up to you. At this point, I actually took a major L and got makeup on my scarf, but it's okay. The road to slay is not always flawless, and it turns out good in the end anyway, so I just continued on with my foundation and kept it moving. Now I'm using my favorite concealer, my Kat Von D Lock-It Concealer in the shade D33 Warm, and I'm putting this in a triangular shape underneath my eyes, right underneath my chin, some underneath my cheekbones, and some on my forehead. Next, I'm using my LA Girl Pro Conceal in the shade Cool Tan, and using this on the inner corners of my eyes and right down the bridge of my nose. Now I'm just using that same damp beauty blender that I used earlier to apply my foundation to blend out my concealer. Now for the concealer, I'm using the pointed end, and for the foundation, I use the round end, and I continue to use this round end when I'm blending out the edges of my concealer. Now, these are really the only two powders I trust on my face, my Sacha Buttercup powder and my Laura Mercier translucent powder. Now I'm just mixing those two together and applying them also with a damp beauty blender in the same places that I highlighted. Now, this is not a typical beauty blender. This is a makeup sponge I got from Ulta, and I really like to apply my powder with this because it really gets very close to underneath the eyes, and it's very precise, as you can see as I'm using it on my nose, and it just has a very, very flawless and smooth application when using powders. Now I'm just applying some translucent powder to the areas I would usually get smile lines. Now I'm using my Dark Chocolate Soleil Deep Tan Bronzer from Too Faced and my Morphe E1 to just bronze my face and warm it up a little bit. Now I would usually do this step first, but then I realized I wanted more of a defined contour, so I'm using a Morphe flat contour brush and the shade Sweet Tea from the Grave Girl Swamp Queen palette and just sharpening up that contour. I'm also adding a little bit more powder underneath that contour to make sure it's still fierce. Okay, so I have my lashes on. I'm waiting for my glue to dry. In the meantime, I've already wiped off the powder right underneath my cheekbones with a Morphe E48 brush. So I'm going to continue to do the rest of that with everything else I'm baking with. Now I'm using my NARS Orgasm Liquid Illuminator, and I actually love, love, love this stuff. It gives me such a nice glow without actually using powder highlights, which can come off as powdery. And I'm using my e.l.f. Duo Fiber Brush to just blend this out. Now y'all know I'm extra, so for my second illuminator, I'm going to use the Multiple Stick by NARS in the shade South Beach, and use that same e.l.f. Duo Fiber Brush to apply this illuminator. Now I'm going back into that Swamp Queen palette in the shade Does This Thing Really Work for my blush, and I'm applying this with the Morphe E3 brush to the apples of my cheeks. Now to darken this up and finish the eye, I'm going back in with that shader brush into Teddy Bear and applying this on my bottom lash line. Next, I'm layering Wine and Dine with my M443 and just smudging this bottom lash line out even more. Now I'm using the M441 brush and blending out this bottom lash line even further in the shade Plum from earlier. Now I'm using my Makeup Forever Aqua XL Eye Pencil in the shade D12 to tightline my upper lash line, and I'm also going to use it to line the outer corner of my bottom lash line. Now I'm going back into the shade Teddy Bear with my BH Cosmetics brush to make sure everything is blending seamlessly. To finish off the eyes, I'm using my two favorite mascaras, my Sephora Outrageous Value Mascara and my Better Than Sex Mascara. I really love Better Than Sex for my lower lash line because it just separates and thickens up my lower lashes so well. Now I'm just misting my face with my homemade MAC Fix Plus. Excuse that extremely wretched moment where I had to take this off, but you know, the face has to be beat. So, now I'm going to put this back on. Now, I wouldn't recommend buying this product because it did break off camera, but I've lined my lips with the Rimmel London Exaggerate Lip Liner in the shade 64 Obsession, and I'm now putting on lipstick. I think I'm using ColourPop in the shade Tule. I'm like 90% sure that's how it's pronounced, but I will be putting all of the products in the description box for you guys. And this is the completed look. Thank you so much for watching, and please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. See you next week.